Hey, thanks so much for listening to the Ridge Community Church podcast. My name is John. I'm one of the pastors on staff at the Ridge, and our vision is to bring the hope of Jesus into every home. So as a piece of that, our goal each week is to bring you something that's hopeful and helpful. So subscribe to this podcast to make sure you don't miss any hopeful and helpful conversations.
Hey everyone, and thanks for listening to this episode of the Ridge Community Church podcast. If you find today's episode hopeful and helpful, then please follow or subscribe, and then rate and review so that more people can find the conversation. Today, our Oak Creek Franklin campus pastor, Forrest Anderson, joins the podcast to talk about leadership. He shares his journey from the corporate restaurant industry to becoming a pastor and what he's learned about leadership throughout the process. This is my conversation with Forrest. Hey, Forrest, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, definitely, man. It's always a pleasure to be hanging out with you, dude.
You're just excited that you have a chance to not be currently shoveling snow, right?
Oh yeah. We got like 10 inches this morning, which is great. And it's that heavy stuff, which is, really, really fun to shovel.
Do you make your kids shovel? Is that, or do you guys do a snowblower? What do you guys do?
Well, I have 2 teenagers now. And so Funny thing was my wife last night on the way home was calling me, says, hey, do the kids know how to use the snowblower? Right. Because it was like a couple inches on the ground. I said, no, teach our kids, our boys, how to be men and make them go out there and shovel. They don't always should have that snowblower in their hands. You know what I mean? Like I grew up without a snowblower my whole life, like up until I bought one. Like let the kids learn how to shovel.
That's their rite of passage, like
leadership lesson number 1.
Throughout the ages, people have had manship ceremonies, right? Go and hunt their first whatever.
Yep.
No, it's you gotta shovel with this metal shovel.
Metal shovel, and you got to shovel the end of the driveway where the plow comes through and plows everything back into the driveway. Like you get that spot down, you have learned how to shovel in this
Yes. Okay. All right. Well, away from the shoveling talk. The last time we chatted was right after the Oak Creek Franklin campus launched. Just curious, checking in. Hey, how's everything going? Any highlights you'd want to share with us about what's happening over there?
Dude, it's awesome. I mean, it's we're like 5 months in now, and so it's kind of been a journey. You up until the campus launches, which is a church, our church campus. Up until that launches, you got to learn. Okay, how do we build the team? How do we get everybody excited about this? And then all of a sudden the launch comes. You're like, okay, we actually got to figure out how to build the church. We're portable, so we got to figure out how to build the church, build the stage, make a kids area. And then so we launched in the beginning of November. So we had all that. Then all of a sudden Christmas comes up. We're like, okay, how do we have multiple services and Christmas services and do all of that? And so it's just this really kind of crunch timeline of figuring out how to do church. And now we're at the stage where we actually kind of have settled in and we get to figure out how to be the church. And this is a really fun stage because we get to talk about, the future. And we just had our first baptisms a couple of weeks ago. We baptized 6 people at our campus, which was just awesome. I mean, the first baptisms, and you get to see that first person get dunked, and you see life change happening, and the people that have put in all that blood, sweat, and tears in literally learning how to set up a church at 5 o'clock in the morning. You just get to see them watch. Okay, this is what we're doing, and this is just the beginning of what God wants to do. So we're at a really fun, exciting stage right now.
I imagine it's got to be pretty cool with you kind of look at the lifespan, right? You start off and it's only with people you're just connecting with before you even launch, right? You're connecting outside of a Sunday morning, you're connecting outside of service. And then you go through that stage where it's you're saying it's almost like survival, okay, almost everything is about service for a period of time, right? Because you're figuring out how do you make this service to where people can come and grow and stuff like that. And now you're at the place where you're okay, we know church just isn't a building. We know church just isn't a service. And so how do we make sure that we're reaching people and connecting with people outside of that? That's cool.
Yeah, it's a great stage. It's a great stage to be at, and it's fun because that's the fun stuff you get to talk about. Whether this chair gets set up here or there, or whether this rope gets put here or there. And, I mean, those are the stuff that over time you're okay, come on, let's just figure out how to help people get baptized, man.
Yeah. How many, you guys had your first baptism recently, right? How many you guys, you said 6?
6. Yep, we baptized 6 people, I think it was 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago.
How cool was watching that moment?
Oh, it was amazing. It was amazing. There's just, I don't know. I think when you're a point leader of a church or even an organization and you say, okay, here's the vision of what our organization is. And for us, right, it's to help people or to help people find and follow Jesus and to bring the hope of Jesus into every home. And so when you literally see that happening right in front of you, you're like, man, this is why we do what we do. And whatever organization like you work in, like whatever that vision is or that mission that they have, when you get to see that, it's just something special. Like you see everything coming together, like, yes, that's why we do it.
Yeah, you talk about being the point person and leader. I'd love to chat with you about some leadership stuff. I know you have kind of a unique perspective because you started off in the restaurant world, and then you became a pastor. And I'm sure that's exactly how you planned everything when you were 10.
Oh yeah, when I was 10, that's what I said I wanted to do. I'm going to sit here on a podcast with John one day, talking about pastoral and organizational leadership.
I mean, I don't even know if I was alive when you were 10. So.
True. Very true.
Okay. So throughout that process, how do you feel like just, maybe your views as a leader have changed?
Yeah, I think, man, they've changed a lot. And I think, you work in, I spent 20 plus years working in the corporate world and restaurants and bars, nightclubs like that. That world is what I spent my time in. I think, you go to school, you go to high school, then you go to college. You're like, okay, I've got this dream of being an executive in some sort of organization. And so I went to business school. You learn all these tasks, you learn all these things that you have to do. And then all of a sudden you go into the corporate world, like, all right, I am this man and I know what I'm doing and I'm going to get out there and I'm going to take over the world. And so then you start at the bottom of the totem pole and, you work your way up and into the organization, and then you become a leader and you start, okay, yes, like now I actually have got experience and I've learned stuff and I've got some wisdom and knowledge, like in that world that I spent, 20 plus years in. And then all of a sudden God has a different plan. And I'm all of a sudden starting back over again in like the pastoral world. And you're like, okay, now what does it mean to be a pastor? Like, what does it mean to lead a church? What does it mean to have volunteers instead of people that you pay to work for you? And it's been quite a journey. So, I mean, there's just been a ton of stuff that I've learned over the course of time. But I think one of the biggest things is how do you learn throughout that? And I think that's what I do, right? So when you start off in your career, even coming out of college, right, you think you know everything, but then all of a sudden you learn different steps of kind of leadership along the way as you grow in your organization. You get the wisdom and you get the knowledge of that industry. And then after 20 years of knowledge in that, to all of a sudden be thrown into something again where I didn't really know what I was doing. Even as an organization, just having a new person in this new position and a new role and doing something we've never done before, just having to learn again. And it really, I think, brought a part of the appreciation. I think leaders are always learners. Like we have to continue to learn. We have to continue to grow. We have to continue to figure it out. Because once you kind of settle in that role and you think you know everything, then your world gets rocked. And for me, it was changing careers and I had to start back over again. And it's been fun. So for me, just learning over time is probably one of the biggest things. I think as leaders, we just have to constantly be learning to grow. We can't be stagnant.
Yeah, I feel like there's this expectation or maybe a thought process that if you are the leader, if you're the top of the totem pole or whatever, then you'll have all the answers, And it sounds like you, especially coming into ministry and being like, I don't know as much as I wish I did, but at the same time, you're leading people. So what's that like? What is it like when you don't feel like you have the answers, but you still need to be leading?
It's scary.
Yeah,
it really is. Like, I think the first time, I got asked something that I didn't know, it was like, oh my gosh, people are looking up to me. I'm supposed to be this leader. I'm supposed to be this person. I'm supposed to have this knowledge and I'm supposed to know this thing. And to sit there and realize, wow, I don't know that. It's a scary thing. And I think when I was young in my ministry career, so young in my second career, I tried to grasp for an answer. I tried to say, hey, like, this is what it should be. And I'm trying to grasp for the answer I think they need to hear, as opposed to sitting there and just saying, you know what? I'm not sure. I don't know, but I'll find that out. Let's figure that out together. something along those lines. And I think that's one of my parts of leadership that has changed. Like I thought I had to know the answer, because coming out of a career where the answer, like I spent 20 years, right? I knew the answers, right? I knew what I was doing. And also me throwing into something where people are looking up to as a leader. And so I think leading is not knowing the answer. It's just saying, okay, let's figure out how to do this, and let's figure out how to do this together. It's showing confidence in the ability to find the answer, not kind of shying away from that, or not trying to make things up. Like people know, like if you're making up an answer, then that really just, like, that's not authentic.
Just what I do on the podcast. So that's fine.
Right. But people, I think they know that. Like I think they see that, like when you're sitting there trying to make something up, and then, their BS meter goes up, right? They're like, okay, how do I trust this guy? How do I allow this person to lead me? But if you sit there and look at somebody and say, okay, that's a great question. Like, I'm not 100% sure, but let's figure this out together. Then you're leading them as well, because you guys are learning how to do this together.
Do you think that kind of knowledge would have changed how you led in the restaurant industry?
Oh, yeah. I think so. I think so because it's so much more people focused. I think when you're in the corporate world, you're so driven on results, success, whatever that, for us in the restaurant business, it was the bottom line. Did we make this much money today? Did we have this many people come in the restaurant, and did we make this much money, right? Where there was margins in right place? Did we make as much money as we possibly could? And secondary is like, did we make the people happy who walk through the door? But there was never this understanding of like, did we create this environment where we were walking people through life together and trying to help people grow in their own skills and knowledge of the corporate world. I think you're like, okay, you'll figure it out. You just got to move up the next ladder, step of the ladder, but you'll figure it out. Whereas that way of leading in the church was like, you've got to bring people along with you and help them and grow them and do it in a way where it's authentic and that you just want something for them. That just wasn't present in there. And so I think we would have changed I think it would have changed my outlook on the industry and how we did it for sure.
You mentioned that now you get to lead volunteers versus lots of staff people. How is that different?
I think it's huge. I think, right. If you got staff people, and let's say, I think, one of the biggest organizations I ran at one point had close to 200 staff members. And if somebody didn't perform, you could say, okay, I'm not going to pay you, right? We're going to let you go of your job. You will not get paid.
Yeah.
Right. That's the solution, right? If you don't perform, you will not get paid. Now we've got to convince people to do some of the messiest, dirtiest, toughest jobs and tasks in a church that we can, and we can't pay them. So like, how do you help people? How do you keep people encouraged and engaged and want to do that? And so I think the biggest thing I learned going into ministry and from leading standpoint versus being in the corporate world is this idea of you got to start with the why. Like maybe in the corporate world, the why is a paycheck, but here in ministry, that can't be the why because there's no paycheck. There is no paycheck.
Yeah.
And so you got to dig deep and say, okay, why are they doing the tasks that they're doing? And why should they want to do the tasks that they're doing? And how do you tie them to the big picture, the vision of where you're going as an organization? Say, okay, your little job is actually a big job because it's a part of this big vision that we have. For example, I got guys that show up at 5 o'clock in the morning, pick up trailers, bring a trailer to our church. We're a portable church, so we're in a school. Bring a trailer at 5 o'clock in the morning so that we can roll out flooring, set up chairs, set up stage, right? That's a task that these guys have to do. And there's some women too. I don't want to use the term. But okay, so every week on Sunday at 5 o'clock in the morning, okay, how do we keep them motivated to continue to do that, right? Yeah. And it's sitting there saying, okay, what you are doing in here is you're creating this environment, right? You are setting up this environment where people can experience God. And so they're experiencing God here. And guess what? When they experience God, they start growing in their faith and then they get baptized, just like we saw a couple of weeks ago. So those are the people that I pulled aside on that day and said, hey guys, you know why they're getting baptized today? It's because you pick up a trailer at 5 o'clock in the morning and you drive it here and you set up the flooring and you set up the stage and you set up the lighting equipment They experienced God, and God moved in their life here and opened up their life to something that's amazing. And now they made a decision to change their life and allow God into it.
Yeah, I've kind of heard it described that if you can lead volunteers, you can lead anybody because they're willingly giving up their time, right?
Yeah.
And we can see that in the corporate world too, or business or whatever, where people will only stay loyal to a paycheck for so long.
Yeah.
We're seeing that with like kind of the great resignation going on right now.
Resignation. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
think about it. Like, time is the most valuable asset that we have. We're not going to get any more. Right? It's here, right? This is every second we spend right now is that here on earth that we lose. And so how do we make sure that we're valuing their time and that they're using that time to do something that they want to do, that they get the privilege and honor of doing, not just that they're there doing this task, because they'll get bored of that real quick. If all it is a task that they perform every week, they're going to get bored and they're going to get frustrated at that really, really quick.
Is there a way that you try to connect maybe some of the leadership stuff that you've learned with stuff at home, like leading at home, leading in different areas you've had of your life?
Oh yeah. I don't pay my kids.
which we learned with the snow shoveling, right? Yeah.
No, but I think it's that same kind of, a lot of the same principles that we use at work, especially for me, I get to use at home because, you're trying to help our kids and our family and just the family unit itself grow and do something that's amazing in this world and perform and, all the things you still want the people to do, whether you're at work or you're at a church or wherever you're at. And we got to use this. And I'm the point person of my household, right? As the father, I believe that I am the point person of my household. And so I got to figure out, okay, how do I lead, my 10-year-old girl to not make stupid decisions in her life? How do I lead my teenage boys to not do something that really screws up, not make the same mistakes I did?
Yeah.
And again, it comes down to helping them understand the big picture of things and understand the why. Like, why do I want this for you? It's not saying, Desi, Miko, I want something from you. Although there's times that I need something from them, but
yeah.
Okay, hey, dude, like, I really want this for you. And here's why. And here's the steps that I believe that you should take to get there. And so this is why I'm talking to you about this thing. Again, it comes back to that vision. Like, I want you to have a bigger vision for your life and who you can be and what God wants to do through you. And so the same things that I take for a person who's bringing the trailer, here's the bigger things that God wants for you, and here's how you get to be a part of that. And it's the same thing with my kids. And it doesn't always work. I think we get most frustrated with the people that we're closest to. I think they're the ones that know how to push all of our buttons. They're the ones that they have the most triggers, right? All of a sudden, one of them says this word and like, oh, here he goes again, right? You get triggered. But then you got to step back and say, okay, what's the bigger vision that I have for my family? And I believe that God has for my family. And I say, okay, I've got to keep this in front of myself and then keep that in front of my kids.
Yeah. Can you talk about that a little bit? Like, because you've mentioned vision and the why a few times, but I'm sure that has to come from your own crystal clear understanding of what you want from whoever or what you want for whoever.
Yeah. I think the most clear we are on the vision, the clarity that everybody has around the vision. I think it starts with me, right? As the point person, I've got to have the clarity around what that vision is. And then we've got to communicate that down. And I think, vision can trump mistakes. Vision can trump hurt. Vision can trump a lot of things that happen in your life. And as long as you keep that vision out front, people have a lot more grace with you because they understand, okay, we're actually trying to get to this place. We're trying to get somewhere. And yeah, we made a mistake or we hit some bumpy roads. So I think it all starts with that. It all starts with the why. It all starts with that vision of where we're going to go together. And if we don't get everybody on the same page, then we're just people kind of going against each other in opposite directions versus all saying, hey, this is where we're heading, man. This is what we're trying to accomplish.
That might be easier to do maybe in a corporate setting or like a nonprofit or whatever. Like the vision, I think, becomes more clear as you understand, like, okay, what's happening. Is that something that's harder to do at home?
It is, because young people, you know what I mean? Like our kids, they see what's in front of them right now in that moment of time. And that's the most important thing to them at that moment of time, right? They see the fact that they have to give up something that they want right now at this moment of time. And that's going to hurt them right now in this second, or it's going to disappoint them right now in this second. But who cares if in the future they get 100 times that coming back to them? Like they just are so fixated and stuck on what's in front of them right now in that moment of time. It's hard to pull them up. So I think that's the biggest challenge that I have as a father, is just saying, no, think, step up a little bit. Like, let's think bigger. Let's think about, the real reason we're having this conversation. Let's just not think about what immediately is the gratification that you're getting out of this.
I don't think that's something that's just unique to kids, teenagers either, right? I think that's something that as adults, maybe the form of it looks a little bit different, but the instant gratification, the seeing the bigger picture, if you're not very like purposeful about that, we talk about like leading yourself as well. I'm sure that's a part of it too.
Oh yeah, no doubt. I'll get myself frustrated all the time with just thinking about the things I'm missing out on, or the things that my kids instantly are missing out on too. Like I feel the burden, I feel the pressure. And I think as a point leader, both as your household and a point leader as an organization, there's this burden that we carry that nobody else in the organization is ever going to feel. And it's this burden for wanting that for each and every person that you're leading. And you feel that. So you're constantly looking at things, and you're constantly looking for things that you could fix and things that you can help with. And sometimes you become cynical, and it becomes too much negativity, because that's what you're kind of searching for, instead of even ourselves stepping back a little bit. Okay, what is God really doing in these situations? Like, what are the amazing things, right, that he's doing already? How is he already working? And we almost put blinders on from that stuff at times, because we're trying to fix and lead too much, versus stepping in and say, God's doing some amazing things, and my kids are doing amazing things. And my wife has to remind me that all the time. Actually at home, say, hey, yes, I know that he's struggling in this, but look at all the other stuff that he's doing. That's amazing. My kids have amazing personalities. They have a dark side to those personalities. And sometimes I focus too much on the dark side of those personalities and try to fix that, versus saying, man, how do we just embrace the positive aspects and really push that forward too? So I think, both in the organization and at home, that's really tough for me to constantly stay up there too.
That bigger picture kind of mentality constantly. Yeah. So say somebody's listening right now and they're like, okay, that's great, but I don't have this position. maybe I don't even have, maybe I don't have kids or whatever. Maybe they could, right? But their kind of mentality is, well, I'm not a leader.
Yep.
What would you say to them?
Leadership is simply influence. Like, I don't think we're all wired to lead organizations of 100,000 people or millions of people, or to lead a country, or to lead, the world.
Yeah.
Right. But we all have somebody in our life that we have influence over. We've always got somebody that we have influence over. And so how do we look at that person and say, okay, what am I doing to help that person grow? Or how am I doing? I mean, or maybe you're leading, 100 people, but, maybe it's just that one person. And how do we break it down to just showing that person that we care about them, that we love them, and that we want something for them, and that we can influence them? You have influence. Everybody has influence over somebody. And that's really what leadership is.
Yeah, that's really I wonder if a better question is even like, how do you lead someone when you're not in charge of them? Because I think that kind of our gut reaction to leadership is the boss, the chief, whoever is in charge.
Yep.
But if you break it down to influence, well, then that means I can be a leader with my friends. That means I can, even my boss, like if I have influence with them, like I can help lead up.
Yep. I mean, think about everything you do, right? People see. just who it sees. The people that are around you, the people that are closest to you, the people that you have influence with in your life, they see the way that you handle yourself. They see the way that you walk through this world, the way that you talk to other people. They see that. And so how do you do those things so that when other people see you, that they see a positive aspect in that and they want to do those things? That's the influence that we all have. So when we're out in public and we're having a conversation with our kid and somebody who's standing there next to us and sees the way that we have a conversation with our kid, that's influencing that person.
Yeah.
When we're at work and we're having a conversation with our coworker, or we have a tough customer coming at it. And when we handle those things in a way that are positive and that are caring about each other and that are done in a way where, again, we look at each other like we want something for each other, other people see that. They notice that. And then you get to influence them in that way. And that's how you get to influence your bosses, right? They look down and say, okay, how does this person handle the way that they walk through the world and the tough things? And maybe this person right now is going through some struggles in their relationships or struggles with health with some of their family members or something that's happened in their life. And then they see this person that's handling it in a different way. And they're like, I don't know if I could do that, but I want to learn how to.
Yeah.
That's influence. It doesn't have to just be like, how do you do your job better? How do you lead better? No, you're just influencing people, and that's leadership. So what is that legacy like you're leaving behind for people when you leave a place that they say, oh, I miss this about that person, or man, I wish we still had this, like that legacy. It's not about doing your job. It's not about performing the tasks. It's about how you're influencing the people around you and the impact you have on them.
This might be a dumb question, but I'm going to ask anyway. How do you kind of prevent yourself from being exhausted in that, right? Because there's a mentality there of almost like I need to constantly be on, or if I'm influencing people all the time, I'm leading people all the time, man, that mentality might sound just like really draining and like needing to be constantly on, like I said. Is there a balance there? Is that a shift of perspective? Like, how do you prevent that from happening?
Well, I think you don't have to think about yourself of always being on. You just got to think about, how am I handling whatever situation comes at me? So even when things are hard and you get frustrated and you're mad and you're angry, those are real emotions, real things that we go through as human beings.
Yeah.
And you can get those, right? I'm not saying sit there and be this perfect person and try to have your behavior change so that people see you as something different. No, just allow them to see who you are in those moments as well. And then just think about, again, like, okay, I'm struggling with this and I know that I'm really with this. And so how do I be open about that with the people that I'm around too, and say, hey, I really struggle with this and I'm hurting right now. And that's leading them to say, like, you don't have to be perfect too.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of freedom and power that comes with that, right? Because it's this mentality of, if I'm genuine and I'm holistically growing as a person, right, then I can influence people in those moments in whether it's vulnerability or how you work through this frustrating problem. How do you manage it when when you are angry? How do you manage that? Like that, I think, puts it in a grasp that feels more achievable, because it's like, okay, how am I responding to these situations? And just kind of just understanding that you're always influencing people.
Yep.
And you're either leading them well or leading them poorly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the things that I had to learn was, how do I, especially as becoming a pastor, right? You had to say, okay, how do I lead people as Forrest, who's a pastor? And I think one of the things that I struggled with at first was I had this idea, okay, I needed to be this pastor. I needed to be on stage all the time. I needed to be this perfect person that people had to look up to, and I had to have all the answers, and I had to make sure that everything I was doing was perfect, and I couldn't let them into anything that I was struggling with. And so I had to be this Pastor Forrest. And then when I had this conversation one day and I realized, you know what? I'm not Pastor Forrest. I'm Forrest, who so happens to be a pastor.
Yeah.
That changed my mentality. I'm Forrest, right? I want people to see me as Forrest. not as past Forrest, just who happens to be a past. So the things that I struggle with, the realness about who I am, that can influence people in a positive way too. Because then they see, what are the things that you really struggle with? And that's authenticity and opening yourself up to all of that. And it took me a long time to figure that out.
What is that? How has that difference helped?
It gave that freedom that you're talking about. Like, I can just be Forrest.
Yeah.
I can just be who God made me to be. And of course, I've got to think about the positive aspects of my personality, and then the negative, the dark sides of my personality. And I say, okay, I got to work on who I am all the time as well. Yeah. And I got to make sure that I'm growing as a leader and learning how my relationship with God is growing, and making sure that I'm trying to be more like, Jesus every single day of my life. But it's taken away the idea that I have to be this person that's on the platform all the time, holier than thou. I could just be who I am.
Yeah, I really appreciate that you mentioned that, because it's that balance, right, of understanding that you want to be genuine, but that's also not an excuse to like, well, I'm just being me, that's not an excuse to be a jerk. Not saying you're a jerk, but you know what I mean? It's not an excuse not to try to grow and kind of develop who you are. But I think holistically, just even our conversation, I can sense that leadership, there's a position side of it where you're trying to make the right decisions and connect people to this vision, but also just the day-to-day, like leading people and how you influence them, and leading people and how you treat them. And I think that's a different perspective of leadership than I think we hear and we talk about a lot.
Yeah, you need them to connect with who you are, and you need to connect with who they are, right? You have to look at them and say, you're important to me, you're valuable to me. Otherwise, again, why would they take what you say to them in any sort of positive way? Because they're like, oh, this person just wants something from me, right? They need me to be this cog in the wheel, versus, no, this person really wants me to be a better version of myself, the better, the version that God ultimately wants them to be. And so when they say, you want something for them, you don't want something from them, it changes the mentality of how they even receive feedback and all of that.
Do you think that's one of the bigger changes you've probably experienced going into like being a pastor, is that the mindset of leading isn't what can I get from them, but like, because I feel like that's like a big, I could be wrong because I have not been in the corporate world, but that's my assumption, is that there's a lot of like, I want to lead these people so that like I can showcase that I'm a good leader, versus I want to lead these people so that they're the most successful in their role for them.
Yeah. I think the corporate world says, how do I use you to make my performance better? And I think what we have to look at is say, how do I lead you to make you better? And my legacy of performance is going to be, how many people did I lead up? How many people did I help develop? How many people? It doesn't make a difference like whether I get the recognition for that, but how do I help you get the recognition that you deserve? How do I pass the recognition to you? And I think that's completely different than the corporate world. The corporate world is like, okay, I need to stand on your back so that I can move up on the ladder.
But I mean, think about how effective that would be in the corporate world too, because there are leaders that do that, right? And have great success with it.
Oh yeah. My favorite leaders are the ones that looked at me and says, what can I do for you? What can I do for you? How do I help you?
Yeah.
And it's a simple question, but not everybody asks that.
Yeah. Well, Forrest, thank you so much for chatting with me about this topic. I love your perspective, and I love the things you've learned and how it can help, and the influence mentality. And I think that last conversation is the thing that will stick with me. It's just this idea of, when I'm leading, it's because I want something for that person. I'm not leading so that I can get something from them.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome, buddy. Always good to be here with you.
Yeah. Have fun with the snow.
Always. Always do.
Well, that was my conversation with Forrest, and I think my 2 leadership takeaways are really helping people, even if it's yourself, having a clear understanding of why and what their efforts mean. And then the second thing is motivation. Why do you want to influence someone to grow? Is it because of what you want for them or from them? Now, thanks for listening to this episode of the Ridge Podcast, and make sure to follow and subscribe so that you don't miss any hopeful and helpful conversations.